The wind is a mysterious force, a constant companion to the living world. It carries whispers of the past, the chill of an approaching storm, the scent of earth after rain, and the faint aroma of burning wood from distant hearths. But when the night grows still, when the air turns sharp and unnatural, the wind carries something far more sinister. It carries something watching, something waiting. There are places where the air never sits right, where gusts twist in ways they shouldn't, where silence falls too suddenly. These are the places where the old stories warn of the Sluagh. The Sluagh, known in Irish and Scottish folklore as the host of the unforgiven dead, are not your typical spirits. They are not the benign ghosts that linger in quiet corners, nor are they the malevolent entities that haunt specific locations. The Sluagh are something far worse, a collective force of corrupted souls, rejected by both heaven and hell, bound to roam the earth in an eternal hunt for the living. They are the forgotten, the abandoned, the unforgiven. The Sluagh were not always the terrifying entities they are now. Once, they were men and women, flesh and blood, bound to the same world as those who now fear their name. But something set them apart, something so terrible that even death could not absolve them. Unlike those who found peace in the afterlife or remained as harmless spirits, the Sluagh were rejected by every realm. They were too corrupted, too twisted by their own deeds to pass into any afterlife, be it heaven, hell, or the other world. In Irish and Scottish lore, it is believed that the soul has a journey to make after death. The righteous, the beloved, and the remembered move on, guided by spirits of light, carried to their resting place with prayers and offerings. But what happens to those who are abandoned in death? What becomes of those whose names are spoken with hatred, whose bodies are left unburied, whose final moments are filled with despair rather than peace? Some say the Sluagh were once wicked souls, oath-breakers, betrayers, the cruel-hearted who preyed upon their own families. Others whisper that they were not evil, but merely forgotten. Those who died without funeral rites, those whose bodies were lost to the sea, those whose spirits had no place to go. And perhaps the most unsettling belief of all, some claim that one does not have to be truly wicked to become one of them. It is not only a matter of guilt, but of abandonment. To be unloved, unburied, and unwelcome is enough to make the soul fester. The transformation into the Sluagh is not a gentle process. It does not come with the soft whispers of a soul slipping away or the slow fading of a ghost into the ether. No, the transformation into the Sluagh is violent, agonizing, and irreversible. It begins with the wind, a foul, biting wind that carries screams instead of rain. This wind rips the humanity from the soul like leaves torn from a dying tree. At first, those who become Sluagh do not go willingly. They fight. They call out for their loved ones. They reach toward the light of the living world, desperate to claw their way back. But resistance is futile. Their memories, their names, their very sense of self begin to slip away, until all that remains is hunger. This hunger is the cruelest twist of their transformation, a gnawing, insatiable need that consumes them entirely. Some say the newest members of the Sluagh scream the loudest, not just from the pain, but from the horror of knowing they are lost. But the wind drowns out their cries, and before long, they forget why they were screaming in the first place. They become part of the swarm, a writhing, shifting mass of dark figures riding the wind like a murder of crows. The Sluagh are not like other spirits. They do not haunt specific locations or linger in the places they knew in life. They are not bound to houses or graveyards. Instead, they roam freely, hunting wherever the wind carries them. They move as one, a mindless collective force driven by a single hunger for souls. Accounts of the Sluagh's appearance vary. Some describe them as human-shaped shadows with tattered wings, their forms flickering like smoke caught in a storm. Others claim they are skeletal, their hollowed faces frozen in silent screams, their eyes burning with cold, empty light. A few say they have no form at all, just a churning darkness that blots out the stars as they pass overhead. Whatever they truly look like, one thing is certain: you do not want to see them. The air changes before they arrive, not like a regular storm but something far worse. A stillness creeps in first, as if the world itself is bracing for something unnatural. The birds fall silent. The animals grow restless, sensing something they do not understand. Then the wind begins. A whisper at first, barely more than a breath of air curling through the trees. But it builds, faster and sharper, bringing with it a sound that doesn't belong in this world. It is not the sound of leaves rustling or waves breaking against the cliffs. It is voices, dozens, hundreds, a cacophony of wails, shrieks, and broken whispers that no human throat could ever produce. The slua hunt with intent. They do not steal souls at random. There is a pattern, a purpose, a hunger that follows rules only they understand. They are drawn to the weak, the dying, and the guilty. They can smell death before it arrives, gathering outside homes where a person is nearing their final breath. The wind changes, carrying with it a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. And then, if you listen closely enough, you might hear them. A whisper, a voice low and distant, calling the name of the one about to pass. If the dying are left unguarded, even for a moment, the slua will strike. They do not simply snatch the soul the moment the body fails. No, they are patient. They wait until the boundary between life and death is at its thinnest, until the soul is already untethered, hovering in that liminal space between the worlds. And then they take it, leaving behind a body that looks peaceful, untouched, except for the empty, staring eyes. But it isn't only the dying who have to fear the slua. Some believe they seek out those with guilt weighing heavy on their hearts. The oath-breakers, the betrayers, the ones who have done something so terrible that even the other world would not welcome them when their time came. The slua, it seems, do not wait for these souls to die. They come early. A person marked by the slua might begin to notice strange things. The wind speaking in voices only they could hear, shadows shifting at the edges of their vision, the uneasy feeling of being watched even in an empty room. Then the dreams would start, always the same, flying over dark landscapes, surrounded by whispering figures, seeing the world through the eyes of something that was no longer human. Some wake in terror, gasping for breath. Others do not wake at all. And the ones who manage to escape, they are never quite the same. Some go mad, unable to silence the voices in their heads. Some become hollow versions of themselves, as if something has been carved out from inside them. And some, perhaps the luckiest, simply disappear one night, taken into the wind, their names never spoken again. There are places in Ireland and Scotland where people simply do not go after dark. Wide open fields, lonely hilltops, desolate beaches where the wind howls too loudly, carrying voices that should not have been there. These are the places where the slua hunt. Travelers who walk alone on moonless nights, shepherds who wander into the mist and lose their way, fishermen who set sail before dawn only for their boats to return empty. These are the ones the slua take. Even in broad daylight, certain places are dangerous. There are stories of children who stray from the village to chase a bird, only to be found hours later, staring into the sky, silent, unable to explain where they have been. There are tales of young men who go to fetch water from the well and come back different, their voices hollow, their eyes dark and distant, as if something has followed them home. And then there are those who simply never come back at all. The slua are not passive spirits lurking in forgotten places, waiting for the living to stumble upon them. They are a force unto themselves, and wherever they pass, the world is left colder, emptier, and more lifeless than before. Their abilities are not bound by the laws that govern ordinary ghosts or fae. The slua are predators, and they dominate the air itself. When the slua are near, the wind changes. It grows sharp and bitter, even in the heart of summer. It moves in ways that defy nature, twisting back on itself, circling a house like a living thing, cutting through locked doors as if they weren't there at all. Some say that when the slua are near, the air itself refuses to move, leaving an eerie, suffocating stillness in its place. Birds fall silent, dogs refuse to bark, the trees stop swaying, as if the world is holding its breath. And then, when the stillness becomes unbearable, the wind rushes back all at once, a howling, screaming gust that carries voices with it. Voices that have no source. Voices that whisper names best left forgotten. Those who recognize this moment know better than to linger, because by the time they notice, it's already too late. The most terrifying ability of the slua is their power to extract the soul. They do not kill in the way humans understand death. They do not leave behind broken bodies or pools of blood. They do not need to. They take something far more valuable, When the slua set their sights on a victim, they do not attack with claws or teeth. Instead, they reach into the very core of a person and pull out their essence. The body remains untouched. The breath still lingers in the lungs, but the soul is gone, ripped from its shell. Some say the soul is devoured instantly, erased from existence with nothing left behind but a vacant stare. Others believe it is carried away, dragged into the sky to be absorbed by the swarm, where it is forced to join the eternal hunt. Either way, the result is the same: a body without a soul, a husk with no light left in its eyes. A fate worse than death. The slua do not need to be seen to be feared. They can speak without voices, call without tongues. Their whispers travel through the wind, slipping through cracks and doors, drifting beneath the eaves of houses, curling around the ears of those unlucky enough to hear them. The words they speak are different for each victim. For the dying, they whisper comfort, urging them to let go, to surrender, to step willingly into the grasp of the slua. For the guilty, they whisper memories, reminding them of the sins they cannot escape, the faces of those they have wronged, the voices of those who have cursed their name. For the lost, they whisper lies, promising warmth, safety, or the voices of loved ones calling from the darkness. And for the rest, they whisper nothing at all, just a sound, low and distant, an indistinct hum that makes the hair on the back of the neck stand on end. That leaves even the bravest men turning their faces away from the wind. Because once you have heard the whispers of the slua, you are no longer safe. The slua cannot be reasoned with, but there are those who believe they can keep these monsters at bay. The old ways, passed down through generations, are not mere superstitions. They are survival tactics. Because when the wind howls in the dead of night, when the whispers curl beneath your door, when the air turns bitter and still, there is no room for doubt. The slua are near, and if you are not prepared, they will take you. One of the oldest and most well-known protections against the slua is never leaving windows open at night, especially in the rooms of the sick or the dying. The slua target the weak, those whose spirits are already preparing to leave their bodies. The moment of death is when a soul is most vulnerable, and if a window is left open, even a crack, the slua can slip inside and snatch it away before it has the chance to move on. In old Irish households, when a loved one was near death, family members would rush to seal every opening, ensuring that no gust of wind could enter unbidden. If a window was left open, there would be no peaceful passing, just an empty body, eyes frozen in terror, with nothing left inside. Another practice, particularly among families living near the western coasts, was to turn the bed of the dying away from the west. The slua were said to come from the western sky, carried on the winds that swept in from the sea. This direction was one of the other world, of the unknown, of things best left undisturbed. By positioning the bed so that the dying person's feet pointed east, families believed they could stop the slua from entering. This was more than just a precaution. It was an act of defiance, a declaration that the soul inside that body was not theirs to take. Iron has long been known to hold power over supernatural beings, and the slua are no exception. It was common practice to keep a piece of iron near one's bed, whether it was a nail, a coin, or an old horseshoe, believing that it could ward off unwanted spirits. Some even placed iron bars across windows or kept iron keys beneath their pillows, hoping the presence of the metal would disrupt the slua's ability to take their souls. There are even stories of people who, in moments of desperation, threw iron objects into the wind when they felt the presence of the slua closing in. It is said that this could sometimes break the slua's hold, if only for a moment, enough time to escape their grasp. But iron is not a foolproof defense. It deters them, yes, but it does not stop them. And for those already marked by the slua, no amount of iron in the world will save them. Salt has always been regarded as a purifier, a barrier between the physical world and the supernatural. Those who feared the slua often scattered salt at their doorsteps or lined their windowsills with it, hoping to create an invisible wall that the slua could not cross. In some villages, it was said that if you found yourself alone in an open field when the wind changed, you should draw a circle around yourself in the dirt or salt and remain inside it until the slua passed overhead. The slua could not break through the circle. It was a boundary, a division between their world and yours. But this method had its risks. If you made even the smallest mistake, if you stepped beyond the circle before the slua had gone, if the wind carried away the line of salt even for a moment, you would not live to regret it. Perhaps the most important rule of all is this: do not look up. The slua hunt with more than just sight. They are drawn to attention, to curiosity, to the moment when a human mind acknowledges them. Looking upon the slua is an unspoken invitation, a silent agreement that you have seen them, and once they know you have seen them, they will not let you go. Those who look up rarely survive, and if they do, they are never quite the same. Their eyes seem hollow. Their voices carry a distant echo, as if part of them is still trapped in the wind. They forget things, small things at first, a name, a face, a memory of something they should have held on to. And as the years pass, the forgetting grows, until one day they wake up and they don't remember who they are at all. Once the slua have claimed a soul, it does not pass into the afterlife. It does not find peace, nor does it linger as a ghost with unfinished business. The soul is taken, ripped from the body, pulled into the swarm like a dying ember swallowed by a fire. And from that moment on, there is no escape. Unlike spirits that remain tethered to their former lives, those taken by the slua become something less. They do not move with the natural order of things. The swarm is hungry, a force that grinds down the will of those trapped within it, eroding their very existence until all that remains is hunger and sorrow. The few who have witnessed the slua up close say that if you listen carefully, if you block out the shrieking winds, the beating wings, the howling cries, you can sometimes hear individual voices, begging, pleading, crying out for help that will never come. Few things in Celtic folklore are absolute. There are always bargains, tricks, hidden loopholes that allow a clever mortal to cheat fate, but not with the slua. There are no known stories of a soul being rescued once it has been taken. No great warriors who have braved the storm to pull a loved one back. No druids or seers who have called them home. And yet some believe that not all hope is lost. It is whispered that the slua must take a soul willingly, or at the very least, that a soul must acknowledge them before it can be taken. This is why the rule exists, to never look up, never acknowledge their presence, never call their name. But what of those who were stolen without knowing? The dying, too weak to resist. The lost, caught alone in the night, the ones who wandered too far and never returned. There is a belief, buried deep in old folklore, that if a person can find a way to call back the name of the stolen, if they can force the lost soul to remember who they were, then and only then can they be pulled back. But who would dare to call out a stolen name?